It must have been the Carpenter in her that caused her to tell that story. I knew it, but I'm just the son-in-law, and I had determined not to tell that one. My name is Bruce. I am married to Cheryl, the fourth of five. He made sure that I was sticking around when I started dating Cheryl before he put me in his jokes and stories. But then once he did, nothing was off limits. I had Dr. Carpenter for Intro to Missions at Central Bible College in the term in which he almost died. The family always asks which time, and I reply, the time, and they say, which is the time? And I say the one where he had cerebral malaria and we had around-the-clock prayer for him on the campus. The fact that you could have around-the-clock prayer, of course, at an Assemblies of God college, we would expect it, but at not just every Bible college in America could they even organize that. Not every professor would have the popularity to get that kind of response, and not every president would have cultivated the attitude of prayer to get you there. I commented to a member of the family this week that Dr. Carpenter and Brother Lednicki had a special relationship, one that is rarely duplicated at a Bible college. And I mean it with all of my heart. Having served now for 10 years as an academic administrator, I can tell you that presidents and faculty do not usually talk about each other the way that those two do, with such love, admiration, and extraordinary mutual respect. Harold went to teach at Central Bible College after a full career in missions. When he arrived on campus, there were 6 missions majors, and they had discussed what they were going to do with the major. At its peak, there were over 270 missions majors. Okay, it could be 260, but I am part of the family, and, numbers. He was in his teen years when the 5 missionaries from Wheaton were martyred in the Amazon jungle. And I regularly heard him quote what Jim Elliot wrote in his journal. He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. He was no fool. He may have seemed a fool when he packed his suitcase one night and snuck out of the window to go to Bible college at 17 years of age. They wouldn't even allow him to live in the dorms. The local boarding house wasn't sure that they wanted to take him until an old Texan finally looked at him and said, "If he don't pay you, I will." In good Bible college fashion, as we have heard, he fell in love with Myrna Haldeman almost right away. He wrote Springfield, Missouri around that time to the Department of Foreign Missions, as it was called then, and said, "I am ready to go." And they said, "No, you are not." Every student from my era at Central Bible College, 1991, knows this story. He wrote and said, "I am ready to go," and they said, "You must go to college." So he went and got a 3-year degree. He wrote after 3 years and said, "I'm ready to go," and they said, "We have changed the rules. You now need a 4-year degree," so he got another year. Then he wrote and said, "I am ready to go," and they said, "You have to pastor for 2 years." So he did. Then he wrote again and said, "I'm ready to go," and they said, "Okay." And the rest of that, many of the rest of the world knows what happened after that. They moved to Arkansas, as we have heard, where we heard that he ran a woman out of the school. One of the ladies in the church came and recounted all of the sins of the people in the church and said they should put the sinners out. And he replied, "I agree. I think we ought to start with the gossips." Chased a woman out of an annual business meeting in the church. Did you catch the part about him graduating from high school at 17 years of age? He could have followed his brother's footsteps and been Sam Walton's baker. He could have followed another brother into working at a nuclear power plant, and none of us doubt that his intellectual power would have allowed him to do that. It is part legend, but mostly fact. He traveled the world with his Greek New Testament, he told me, so that whether he was asked to preach in English, Spanish, or French, or Portuguese, he could always preach from the New Testament. He had a vision one night at a prayer meeting, and most of the family knows this story. Sunday night, and they were having a youth service led by their pastor's wife, and he had a vision as he was knocked out on the floor by the Holy Spirit, and he saw smoke coming up from a grass hut and somehow knew that he was supposed to go to Latin America. When he wrote them and said, "I'd like to go," he had naturally expected that they would send him to the country of choice, Ecuador, but they did not. He had, during that time when he had the vision, he and his cousin Tommy had been fasting and praying at lunchtime on their high school campus. Now that is not exactly high school behavior. A story that I only learned from Tommy. Harold would have been too humble to have ever told me about it. His long resume excludes the diseases, the times he almost died. It excludes the danger. It excludes the times that he was held up by a machete. It excludes so many things. His resume would actually read very much like what the Apostle Paul wrote. Things that convinced many people that he was a fool, but he is no fool. His students' reaction to his death is that poured in across social media, as well as the reaction from Ecuador, where nearly 40 years later he still holds a revered status in the assemblies of God, tell us that he had invested in people, and he was no fool. He is no fool who invests in the lives of other people, whether it be in the classroom or in an evangelistic crusade, whether it is traveling through the jungle, as the picture on the back of the card shows, or traveling down the streets of Mexico City, as one student fondly remembered. To each of those students, I would say he would be happy that you remembered what he did. And all of those stories from students ended with, "I will never forget it." One student wrote about a story that he used to tell, and I heard him tell. They were in financial hard times, and he prayed to God and said, "If you own the cattle on 1,000 hills, I sure wish you would sell one or two and send the money my way." He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep. All ministers give up things. It's just that Harold and Myrna Carpenter gave up more than most. I'm reminded of the story that he told me when I asked him if I could marry his daughter. I guess few in the family had heard it. When I asked, he never said anything. He actually was in the middle of chewing. That was a good strategy on my part. My roommate had forewarned me, be prepared. He's not going to say yes right away. I hadn't finished saying I wanted to marry his daughter, and he said, "Yes, that'll be fine." I expected questions. What I got were a series of stories about how they had suffered financially for the ministry. He never said it, but I knew it was his way of telling me, "You maybe won't always be able to provide for my daughter, but God will." In fact, my favorite story is of the family, the couple who had given them a can of snake meat as a joke. You heard snake correctly. They put it in their cupboard as a joke. And then as times got tighter and tighter at one point in time in their lives, all they had left in the cupboard was the can of snake meat. They opened up the bottom, ate the snake meat, put the can back in so that that couple wouldn't know how desperate times had been. Several students have recalled so fondly about how he had given up things on their behalf. He is no fool to give what he cannot keep. The money, a nice retirement account, the security. But even more than that, if I were to ask each of the kids, let's not do that, friends. If I were to ask each of the friends, they could fill in the blank. Dad gave up blank that had to do with me to minister. Whether it be a birthday party or an important event, it was hard maybe in the teen years or whenever to know what really was happening. And you may not have known that he wanted to stay home. But he and Tommy Carpenter had fasted and prayed, and God had spoken. and he had a vision of what he needed to do. And he is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep so that he might serve the king. He was commanded by his king to go ye therefore, and he even put it on his license plate for a period of time. Go ye. The going was always assumed in his theology because the Greek is, oh, never mind, it's too late in this service for Greek. All of the family gave. Each of the kids and grandkids and great-grandkids. Because he is only a fool if he gives up gaining what he cannot lose. If you give up so that you can gain something that you will lose, the Bible calls that being a fool. He is not a fool who gives up what he cannot gain, what he cannot lose like the nations. And here on January 12, 2024, Harold has not lost his investment in people. That went with him because he invested eternal things. He has not lost his relationships with his kids. He invested those. He has not lost his relationship with other people. That was an investment. And he has not lost the prayer I heard him pray so regularly. Ask of me, and I will give the nations as an inheritance. For you only take eternal things into eternity. The temporal gets left to other people. You leave the Model T cars to other people. He has no need of them now. You leave all of those temporal things to somebody else. The only thing you take with you is what you did for eternity. When someone chases anything else, the Bible strongly states that such a person is a fool. But when you chase eternal things, you are no fool, no matter what others might say about you, because you gain what you cannot lose. To gain what he could not lose, he went over to 6 of the 7 continents. And the only reason he didn't go to Antarctica is because the Assemblies of God does not yet have a Bible college there. But I promise you, if they had wanted to start one 5 years ago and they had called, he would have gone. Preached in over 55 countries. Some have done more. Few have done it in as many languages. He is no fool to give up what he cannot keep, to gain what he cannot lose. And so he prayed so regularly, ask of me, and I will give the nations as an inheritance. When he heard, well done, good and faithful servant, it was likely said in multiple languages just to make sure that Harold got it. I joke, of course, the only language of heaven is Spanish, according to him. You know, the person who knows 2 languages they call normal. The person who knows 3 languages they call smart. 4 languages they call very smart. 1 language they call an American. Guilty is charged. I remember over and over again him quoting that Psalm 2:8. You know, the title Reverend is not inherited. Mine was bestowed. I didn't inherit it. The title Doctor is earned. It is not inherited. And with each of his titles, with each of his accolades, each of those are the same way. For the title Child of God is only bestowed by God. It is not inherited. The title Child of God only comes by faith, not because your father, grandfather, or great-grandfather lived for God. The call to be a missionary is not inherited. It is only received. You can, because of his life, ask God if he would like to go in full-time service, and I would request that you consider that one more time. I would request you consider it on his behalf. And ask that perhaps one more time the life of Harold Carpenter would speak to us that if you are not called to stay, you are actually charged with the going. And that is what you ought to do. The grandkids and the great-grandkids have never entertained the possibility of that call. Let this be your moment of opportunity. Maybe it's the grass hut with smoke rising. Maybe it's an urban jungle with ministry to drug users. Maybe it's kids surrounding you as you tell them about Jesus. Maybe it's sitting in your office in Florida, teaching students from Haiti in a new missions paradigm. Maybe it's you deploying your tech skills at reduced cost to advance teaching the nations in that new online paradigm. But if any of those spark your heart and give you a heavy feeling in your heart that you cannot describe and explain, we should talk. You might be called. And He would want nothing more than this very moment for you to recognize the possibility that you could be called to full-time ministry service. No inheritance is greater than inheriting a desire to pray with the psalmist, "Ask of me, and I will give the nations." None of those things that could be read in a will really matter a whole lot. What matters most to me is that I inherited, to some degree, the love for going to the nations, the love for reaching souls, and a reality that only real Christians, that all real Christians care about the lost and do what they can in the harvest so that they too might be able to say, "Ask of me, and I will give the nations." You cannot go based on his vision of a grassed hut. That vision must be your own. You cannot inherit the nations based on what Harold did. That would make you a fool. But he is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. Ask of me, and I will give the nations as an inheritance for you. If all you inherit was a love for missions, a desire to hear God's call to go, you would have inherited what Harold not just treasured more than anything, but the only real thing he treasured outside of his family. Any other inheritance is only stuff. Yes, I really did intend for Reverend Dr. Harold R. Carpenter's funeral sermon to be one more mission sermon, an opportunity to respond to a missions call. What else could it be? You don't grow a missions program from 6 to well over 200 without talking to student after student about a missions call. Because he is no fool who prays, "Lord, give me the nations as an inheritance," and then spends 70 years pursuing an answer to that very prayer. And whether you called him Dad, Grandpa, Grandpa Great, or Uncle Ray, you gain your greatest inheritance when you ask for the nations. And so I encourage you to seek the Lord while he may be found, and ask of me, and I will give the nations as an inheritance for you. I don't know that as a son-in-law I'm entitled to speak on behalf of the family, but I will for just a moment say that family is honored at the number of missionaries who have come both to this service and last evening. We are honored by those who have served in national leadership in the Assemblies of God Missions Department who have chosen to spend their snowy Friday afternoon here honoring Harold Carpenter. And in a way, we would say that we as family are claiming him, but I understand in his generation the tradition was for all missionaries' kids to call all other missionaries uncle and aunt. And so in a way, if you're a part of the great missions team of the Assemblies of God, you are part of his family. And as family, we all together could say the same thing. His life spoke of just one thing: ask of me, and I will give the nations as an inheritance. Mark Turney is coming to lead us in one more song. Our conclusion will be a benediction by the chaplain here at Maranatha, Sean Oberg. As for me, I'm going to go sit next to my wife and be a husband.
Dr. Carpenter was